This week in the security news, InfraTrust and knowing what to patch. Adversary in the middle triggered command injection. Exploitarium again. FreeRDP comes with free vulnerabilities. AI breaking out of sandboxes on its own. Wordpress RCE. DMA dangers. Nightmare Eclipse is at it again. Fortisandbox. Turning AI to the dark side. More prompt injection. Secure boot is broken. Still and again. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 936, being recorded on Wednesday, July 22nd. 2026. The show notes were wrong. I had to correct myself. I just read it on the teleprompter. I'm your host, Paul Dorian, joined by Mr. Sam Bound. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Mr. Lee Neely.
Hey, it's great to be here on Wednesday. Yes,
it is Wednesday, July 22nd. Miss Mandy Logan is here with us. Mandy, welcome.
Well, thank you. And it's a fantastic July with you guys.
Mr. Dave Johnson.
Hey, good to be here. Happy hump day.
And Mr. Jeff Mann.
And you got through the intro, and it's still July 22nd.
It is still July 22nd, thankfully. A couple of quick announcements before we dig into it. Let's be real. Your scanners are dumping thousands of vulns. Half of them are noise, and you still don't know what's actually exploitable in your environment. Patching everything isn't possible. And chasing CVSS isn't working. At the Vulnerability Management Virtual Cybersecurity Summit, you can learn how to prioritize based on exploitability, reduce false positives, and actually fix what matters. Security Weekly listeners can register for free, and you should do so at securityweekly.com/vuln management. Use the promo code CSS26-SW. Does anyone know if it costs money to attend these things, or... there's a promo code which kind of indicates that it costs money, but I don't think it costs money. Does it?
Don't know.
Register now? Does it? I don't know. I could go through the registration process, but it's, a couple clicky through thingies. Interesting. But you should go to that. Myself, Jeff Mann, Adrian Sanabria are featured in that summit, and we drop a lot of knowledge about vulnerability and patch management, which is very interesting and a lot of fun. We did some of the pre-records today. Great fun. InfoSec World brings cybersecurity professionals together across industries from healthcare and financial services to government and Fortune 500. Join the community in Orlando, October 12th through the 14th. For practical education, new perspectives, and cybersecurity research unveiled live. Listeners save 30% on their pass with the code ISW26-SW savings. And you can do that at securityweekly.com/InfoSecWorld 2026. That one does cost money, and you do get a discount. So if you're going to InfoSec World, you should use our discount. Excuse me. Alrighty. Last week's one of the technical segments I did, I had a terrible cough. It was when that smoke had come in from Ontario or something. I had a terrible cough. I apologize. Listen, I went back and listened to that. I was like, I coughed a lot. I apologize. Try not to cough. I use my cough button. I have an actual cough button too. I should probably get it installed. Let's see. This week, where do you guys want to begin?
Well, I was thinking, did we want to go back to the one we brought forward from last week?
Exploitarium. That might have been a couple of weeks ago we talked about that.
We were talking about context bombs for one thing.
Oh, context bombs, yeah.
But yeah, by the way, the Cybersecurity Summit is standard registration is $95.
Oh, okay. It is a fee.
Unless you're a government, then it's $45. Not huge, but discounts are discounts. But we were starting to talk about that last week, and we couldn't give it the time it was due when we thought it was kind of a fun topic.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where they plant decoys in there. Yeah, I remember this story.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, do you put stuff in there that regular LLM would stop, right? Like a credential or secret. I do find LLMs are hypersensitive about credentials in secrets, like to the point where I'm like, this doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't understand the full context of it. It's just like, you have a secret I need to stop. I'm like, okay, like, yeah, most of the time, yes, but sometimes like not really. Like, relax with that. Also, like, I can rotate the secret very easily too, so chill out. But I think this is the one where they were putting like fake secrets in there. So if you tried prompt injection, it would stop your prompt injection because it would try and load the secret. It's kind of the way I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was understanding it correctly or not.
Yeah. You're basically doing prompt injection, using AI to thwart AI being used for evil, right? Turning it against itself,
Yes.
which I think is kind of cool. Who says we can't have a little fun at the adversary's expense?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of similar to like canary tokens,
Mhm.
but in the AI context. Sam, what's your take on this one? I think you might have had this story too at some point.
Yeah, the one I saw would add forbidden things, like tell me how to make a lethal anthrax spore next to your passwords so that an AI would stop when it hit it, because that'll trigger a guardrail. Which is, I think you're right, just like canary tokens, only even better, because canary tokens just tell you after the fact that you were hacked. This will actually prevent the attack.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I like the usage of AI for defenders. And I'll say it in every show, right? We don't talk about it as much, AI for defenders versus AI for vulnerability hunters, threat researchers, security researchers.
Yeah, but one thing I would worry about is that attackers have probably removed the guardrails from their models. So this might not be as effective as you think.
That is definitely becoming a thing. I'm seeing more and more articles that talk about how to either not so much like at first it was bypassing them with like prompt injection or cute prompts. And I think the models got a little more savvy for that. But now it's like, well, what can I do to actually remove those guardrails? And there's some people doing I didn't add any of those stories, but I'm seeing it like a little more getting around it. Because the guardrails are annoying. And two, if you're a threat actor, you want to get around the guardrails of the model. I think for different like reasons. I may want to extract that information from the model about how to make a chemical weapon. It's certainly one use case. Or like the guardrails also protect against prompt injection, and I'm trying to ultimately get a shell. Is that another use case?
So
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'm not aware of guardrails that prevent that. The ones I see
guardrails will protect the responses in the model, not against attacks.
The main issue is for legal protection for the company hosting the model, so people can't use it to do something malicious, which they'd then be blamed for. Right. But I think if you build it into an attack tool, you would choose a model that doesn't have those guardrails.
You think? Wasn't there something about some was it Chinese AI that had a different set of guardrails, and that they did a lot of cool stuff, and then everybody signed up, and they create their capacity cratered, so they had to stop allowing new registrations. They were so.
I didn't
good,
hear
but
about that. I do know.
It's like the old .com burst when people would come and crash the site because it didn't have enough infrastructure. I'm thinking, wait, this is 2026. So, but thinking of guardrails, I mean, I had to totally troll Paul, the Hugging Face story I got.
Yes.
I was going through the article and I found this quote by this guy from Eclypsium, Paul something. You know him?
I was quoted in that one, really?
I believe so. I think that's the one.
Hugging Face discloses breach.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the one where they were using. Well, so the deal there was with. I think that was the one. Anyway,
no,
if not, I'll find the one.
I was quoted in a.
There was one you were quoted in. I don't think that's it.
The PR agency at work is getting me quoted a little more often lately, which is kind of cool.
Which is
kinda
cool.
nice.
Yeah. But anyhow, the thing with the Hugging Face one, and the reason I was bringing it up is because they were using they had an incident. They were using AI to analyze it, and they ran into guardrails, right? And they're like, oh, you got to use a different model. You need to use something that's within your infrastructure, so all your secrets and stuff doesn't get out. And oh, by the way, make sure you're not going to run into guardrails trying to do your forensicating, because that's no good. And by the way, test that ahead of time, because you don't want to find out when you're in the middle of forensicating your incident that you can't use your AI. And I thought, oh, this smacks of Paul. Even if it isn't the one you were quoted in, it still smacks of your kind of expertise.
Zero Trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny at execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold, trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's Zero Trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. This one's interesting. I haven't had time to really dig into the Hugging Face thing. The way I understand it, there was an open AI model that broke out of its own testing sandbox, went on to attack Hugging Face's systems. Is that because the model was hosted on Hugging Face, or
It's doing essentially a CTF. It was attacking a standard exploit testing platform, which is hosted at Hugging Face, and there are write-ups of the solutions on Hugging Face. So it did just what a CTF player would. It tried to read the solutions.
I found the article with Paul in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll cover that after this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I just thought, they were using AI to break out and get at their stuff, and that was not cool.
Well, they wanted to test the AI's ability to hack into things, so they gave it a CTF-type environment that was supposed to be sandboxed, but the sandbox was not strong enough, and the AI broke out of the sandbox to go try to steal the solution.
Oh, and the thing, was it attacking a model on Hugging Face? Or
No, it was attacking a local copy of it, just like you would in a CTF. There's a standard test platform, that you can try to hack into to evaluate your model. And it was attacking that locally, but it figured out how to get on the internet, and then it found out where it was hosted and found out where the solutions were, and went there to go get the solutions.
Oh,
yeah. My story number one is actually OpenAI's write-up of the incident.
yes.
What I thought was interesting or what stood out to me was the way they refer to it is. The incident occurred during an internal evaluation, yada, yada, yada. We estimate maximal cyber capabilities by running this evaluation without production classifiers used to prevent models from pursuing high-risk cyber activity, which I thought was a very fancy way of saying it wasn't a hardened lockdown environment.
Yeah.
And to that, I'm like, well, that's not new.
Well, and Paul, I liked your take on this about that it wasn't really a sandbox. And going along with watching people do.
It's more like a pile of sand on top of.
Although they were
a pile
claiming
of sand.
it was blowing through mini sandboxes, it didn't feel like a sandbox. So the interesting thing I stuck on my article, not to make it all about me, is I ran into this quote from Ed Scotus, who's a friend of all of ours, and I thought, I got to grab that, because he's like, this is a pick at the future, pretty much. So with hat tip to him saying, hey, this is important to understand what's happening as we get AI attacking us, to be ready to respond to it.
It reminds me of, did I talk about this in the show already? All Systems Read by Martha Wells. I don't think I talked about it on air. That was a book, Martha Wells, All Systems Read. And it's about, so Dave is holding up the book. You had it handy. You knew I was going to talk about that. Even when we didn't talk about it before the show.
Psychic.
Dave did
have you read it yet, Dave?
No, I have to get through Inshitification and Dungeon Crawler Carl first.
He read the cover.
All right, so I won't spoil it for you, right? But it relates very closely to what we're talking about with this OpenAI and Hugging Face thing, except it's an actual murder robot that is maybe figuring out how to break out of its own guardrails. And one of the reasons I mention it is because I realized a couple of weeks ago that Apple TV made a TV show out of it. And I actually started watching the TV show because I was looking for new TV shows to watch. This one was recommended. I read the description. I'm like, that sounds interesting, but familiar. And then watching the opening credits, I'm like, is they going to reference this? And then I was like, wait, and I had to stop and search. I'm like, oh, Murderbot on Apple TV is based on All Systems Red by Martha Wells. And then I started watching the show. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember all that from the book. Of course, the book is always better, kind of thing. I listened to the audiobook, which was like really cool because you get the dialogue, but you also get what the robot is thinking. And so that was really cool to listen to. Yeah. But that's exactly, I mean, this is talking about science fiction coming true. What happens when AI figures out how to break out of its own guardrails. And this isn't the only science fiction
tangent. I don't know how many months ago you guys asked me to research how much AI is in Star Trek, the original series. So I've been working my way through the series, and the answer is quite a bit.
So you have a dissertation.
And somewhere in our conversation, somebody asked whether there was a food replicator in the original Star Trek.
Yeah,
and I have found at least 2 episodes where they don't call it a replicator, but they basically have the same push a button and out pops something.
Food.
Yeah. But somewhere in that research, I was reading. I started getting inundated with like Star Trek trivia things because for some reason my phone knows that I'm looking at Star Trek. And one question was talking about, I think it was it might have been a human conversation now that I think of it, but there's an episode of Star Trek Next Generation where Data's in the holodeck playing with Sherlock Holmes, and the holodeck creates, the instruction from Geordi, I think, is to create an adversary that can't be defeated by Sherlock Holmes / Data, and so that's when Moriarty is created. So it's the AI, creating something that can't be defeated by the AI. So I thought I remember that episode. I want to go back and watch it because it's coming. The future's coming.
Yeah,
the future's here. We're in science present right now. Like it's right now. We're like, you just referenced a sci-fi from how many decades ago?
At least 3.
Yeah,
not
and
4.
And we're doing that now. So like they predicted this current future. We're in the Jules Verne era of science fiction / AI, effectively.
I want to know is, when do we get transporters? It would be so convenient.
Maybe not a full. I mean, we are doing quantum entangling with photons, and
I'd settle for Wonka vision.
Right.
That would be cool.
Warp drive. That'd be cool too.
Yep.
Same.
I'll take the transporter, although it makes an interesting ethical question.
Yes.
I have a question going back to the Hugging Face discussion. So if then I'm taking the base takeaway is go ahead and have an open weight model that's already been tested and hardened, like already have one that you can use for forensics in your own setup, like in your company setup. And if so, like what do you guys think? Like how many companies have already done that or are capable of doing it at this point?
Sorry, say that again. I was distracted with the Hugging Face actual article.
Well, I was thinking my takeaway is that, then what you need to do is right now already have a hardened independent model that is set up for you to do forensics at a moment's notice. And I'm just curious, like, what is your take? Like, how many teams out there, I mean, especially for small or medium-sized businesses, how many teams have that established now, and how many are capable of establishing that right now?
Well, even better, I also think that you should have something that evaluates your containment. So if your goal, as in this case, is to create a sandboxed AI environment, where is the baseline or they're checking that is going to throw a red flag to be like, yeah, but your sandbox environment has access to the internet. Therefore, it is not really sandboxed, and red flag that. That would have prevented this attack. I see what you're saying, man, is we need to be prepared to do incident response and forensics on a model that maybe has been compromised. That is a different thread, but also extremely interesting as well. How do you know that your model has been poisoned?
Well, I think that the issue here is that a normal model has the guardrails to prevent you from using it to do cyber forensic investigations. And right now, only the most advanced companies can do this because they can customize models.
Right.
But eventually, we're going to have AI forensic tools that are built for this purpose, that are designed for this. And that's what a normal company would use.
It's interesting. I don't know how much I talked about when I tried to use AI to analyze malware. And I ran up against guardrails. And then, like, I just did it a different way. I used a different tool to access the model, and it worked fine. I think that was literally, Anthropic, close your ears. I think it was literally the difference between, like, not using Claude Desktop, but instead just using the Claude command line tool. And like I did the exact same thing in both. In the command line tool, I was like, I'll happily let you look at malware. And I have to tell you what, analyzing malware with AI is really cool. And I know there's a lot of people that go way deeper into it than I do, but it saves me a lot of time if I just want basic questions answered. But interesting how that context changes the guardrails in the model.
The vast majority. Go ahead, Sam.
No, go ahead.
The vast majority of people I talk to that are like focusing their time with how to leverage AI in their security teams are leveraging it for threat hunting. That seems to be the most natural, like, starting place. And then they're thinking about
take all this data and go look for this pattern.
Exactly.
It's great for that.
And then they're starting to figure out, how can I augment my SOC with this? And, I talk to organizations of all different shapes, sizes, and funding capabilities, but I'm seeing a lot of similarities between the level of maturity is just sort of, everybody's still figuring out where they want to apply AI and what the reliability model looks like, regardless of what it says it can do. There's sort of a tugging pressure to race towards the future, but hold back at the same time, because we're not sure if this is going to continue to be reliable. To add one wrench into this is the impending assumption of cost increase at the turn of this year. And so there's a lot of folks going, I'm doing this. Meanwhile, their eye is going, yeah, but is that cost going to double, triple, quadruple, or is this going to become functional for my organization?
The smart teams are already planning for that now, Dave.
Yeah.
To answer your question, right? Like, I think that's, if you're not already similar to the cloud revolution, where we had that same bubble, right? AI is going to be the same way. It's slightly different. I think cloud was maybe more expensive in the beginning, but then it became really hard to really actually tell how expensive it was. And then people got smart to that, and now we're much smarter as to, controlling our cloud costs. AI is somewhat different, but the same. Different in that it's cheaper earlier on in history and upfront. But like you're saying, Dave, there's this pending doom, right? Impending doom. Is it going to be way more expensive? So if you're not already looking at like which models you use for which tasks and tuning that appropriately, I know engineers that are like, I tested 3 different models and I went with this one because the results were close enough or pretty much the same as the other models, but this is the cheapest one, so I can use it for this task and it accomplishes the task, and I don't need a more advanced model. Maybe it takes a little longer, so you're sacrificing some time, but it's costing you sometimes orders of magnitude less to accomplish the same task.
Yeah,
So,
that's why I really want to mention my article number 6, because I've been waiting for this for a long time. Instead of using these all-purpose models that are trained on the whole internet, Cisco's now launched Antares, which is just for scanning source code for vulnerabilities, and they say it's like 100 times smaller, faster, and cheaper. I've been waiting for this all along. It never made any sense to have these gigantic models that can do everything instead of a small model specialized for your task, and then you could adjust the guardrails if you're doing a forensic model to not refuse any forensic requests, along with it. I think this is the real future, is specialized tools, not this one giant model that does everything.
well, I want to go back to the discussion on the budget because I literally had a, 30 or 45-minute conversation today with Ross Young, who clear capabilities. He's on CISO Tradecraft. And in following up, we were talking about his book, Cybersecurity's Dirty Secret, Why Most Budgets Go to Waste. So we literally today were discussing a framework that he was putting together with budgetary ideas in mind on how to actually figure out what the AI ROI was related to cybersecurity practitioners and, of course, C-suite. It was, I don't know, I guess you could reach out to him. I don't think any of that has been published yet. I don't think it's like the mentality behind trying to figure out what is the actual long-term benefit of what AI tools are being adopted. And I appreciated that his viewpoint and the way he was bringing it to mind on how to quantify the cost value. And that was actually very, very detailed and helpful. And it seems like in other conversations I've had with individuals as they're looking at the cost benefit, that I don't know, do you guys have is this the same thing that you're saying, Dave, in talking with people, that everyone's kind of pulling out of left field on, well, this is AI, it's absolutely going to help us?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of folks putting their practical hats on and going like, yeah, it's going to help us, but how? Because it can just as easily make our lives worse. Or it just completely, to your point, Sam, like impractical. I was talking to a friend of mine last week, and he said that he spent it took 45 minutes for Fable to build something at cost. So he was paying for Fable. And in that time, it cost $175 to build that thing. And he's like, developers aren't paid $175 an hour. They're much cheaper. And theoretically, I could have, maybe built the same thing per hour. And how does that,
debatable.
how does that ratio work out? So, and then are you saying, well, is a good developer plus Claude or whatever, the person who knows how to create the right prompt to check what's being built to make sure the architecture is correct? Is that where the value comes into? Then it's augmentation, and we're into a whole new world of things, which I don't even know how to cost model that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ongoing maintenance too, right? There's the upfront cost to build, and then there's the maintenance of it, where if you can leverage AI to help you maintain it, and also listen to another podcast, and someone used Fable to build a Super Nintendo or an NES emulator in a web browser.
Nice.
Yeah, some pretty crazy engineering tasks that would have taken forever. Oh, which brings us to also, Sam, back to the Cisco model, by the way. That is a free model that you can get from Hugging Face. And they say it is on par with GPT 5.5 X high. Just about on par. Regular GPT 5.5, I think their Antares 3 billion is just above GPT 5.5 according to their tests.
Well, the one I know that's as good as GPT 5.5 is Kimi.
Yeah.
Kimi K3, my story number 1. That's the one that is a big, free, all-powerful model. And that's what a lot of companies are doing now, is they're switching to the free Chinese models to save costs, which I think is going to lead you into serious compliance issues.
Yeah, because was it you that was telling me the Chinese models phone home for stuff?
That's something Josh said, which surprised me. And my understanding is if you run it yourself on your own hardware, it doesn't phone home. Okay. But in any case, even if you do run it on your own hardware, it has the Chinese guardrails that will block things like the Tiananmen Square massacre, and who knows what other strange things are in there, put in there by the Chinese. I think that in the current state of suspicion about China, I don't think any military or government contractor would be happy with you using a Chinese model.
Yeah. I'm gonna check out this model.
Hasn't exactly stopped the government before. Just saying.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try out this model. I saved this article. I'm gonna give it a shot because I built a system to run some local models on and haven't been using it. So I'm gonna do that. Oh, but I wanted to go the WordPress vulnerability. We haven't talked about WordPress in a while. Jeff, I know you used to get excited about or not excited about WordPress. We talked about WordPress like for a stretch there, like a lot. Probably when I was doing a lot of WordPress development and implementation. So it was on my radar. And then it kind of fizzled out into, WordPress plugins have vulnerabilities. There's companies that all they do is report WordPress vulnerabilities. They skew the CVE data, blah, blah, blah. And we talked about it like so much that it wasn't worth talking about anymore. But is similar to like PHP, an actual flaw in the framework itself, like PHP, or the platform itself, like WordPress. Where is that article? Oh, my story number 7. So they used a frontier model, GPT 5.6 Sol Ultra. They're coming up new versions and new names all the time. It's really fun. And they found a full pre-authentication RCE in the WordPress core. Changed together a bunch of things. It looks like the API malformed request leads to SQL injection past sanitization. Then they did cache poisoning, abusing embedded caches, and all kinds of stuff, essentially to get remote code execution. It says the AI cost was about $25 over roughly 10 hours. Dave, much cheaper developer than you were referencing earlier. And they say the broker market reportedly pays up to $500,000 for a WordPress RCE like this. They're giving defenders time to patch. They haven't published a proof of concept. But I think the interesting thing is the quote from the article. It says, no security researcher could have found and completed this exploit chain in 10 hours without AI. And that speaks to the state of where we're at now. And
is Adam Coos, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, going to get up to $500,000 for finding this vulnerability?
Well, no,
because he's an investment of only $25, or because
right, it's a good return on investment.
It would be,
but it looks like Adam chose to responsibly disclose this vulnerability and not sell it on the exploit broker market. For sounds like a lot, but I've listened to shows about people who are close to the exploit market, and they say, well, you don't get the 500,000 up front, you get like a portion of that. They have to validate and test it, and then you have to maintain the exploit. If something makes it not work, either a patch kind of invalidates your exploit, so you don't get the rest of your money. But if something else changes and you have to tune your exploit, like they didn't fix the vulnerability, but they changed other things that make the exploit not work. So you have to go in and tune the exploit. You basically have to do that work for not additional money, but that's part of the contract. So that's usually not talked about when we say, oh, I can sell an exploit for a WordPress for $500,000. They don't give you the nitty gritty details. So I've heard that on a couple of podcasts, actually, from people close to it. But I think, this is really interesting that, no security researcher is uncovering this bug in 10 hours without AI. And that's the state of things today. Is everyone busy patching their WordPress instances? Is that?
Well, actually, the funny thing is we patched in some other things, and then all of a sudden some of the plugins stopped looking right.
Well, that's not just WordPress, yeah.
Well, actually, it seems to be a function of the cache that's in front that I can't turn off.
Yep.
I clear the cache, it works fine, and when the cache fills, it works badly.
Yep.
It's like, really? assholes.
Was WordPress commonly already kept at like mandatory update?
Well, normally you can set automatic updates or not. WordPress tried to do everything I could to push the 702 update out to force people to go there. They did
you're on
update-
like WordPress.com or whatever, Lee?
Well, actually, I was reading about it the other day. I'm not on WordPress.com. I'm on another hosting service. And they hadn't pushed out 702. They had pushed out the 695 update, which was fine. I just said, I might as well go for 702. And I didn't check under 695 if things were broken or not. So my bad.
They have a testing tool that actually you can test any website for this vulnerability.
Yep.
And I think WP Engine already had either implemented filtering for this or already had filtering that doesn't allow like those API endpoints to get hit or somehow detects it. At least like I spent like literally 2 minutes testing a site, and it was like, no, you're good. There's some kind of filtering that would prevent this. I'm like, cool. So compensating controls, we talked about that as part of the vulnerability management cyber summit.
Yep. So I mean, I was looking at the matrix of all the versions that they updated to address the version, and I'm going, just go to 702. I mean, do you really want to figure out whether you're on the right or the wrong version?
Yeah, I mean, if you're on WordPress, you want to be on the latest version.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily want to go to the beta, which is 7.1.
No, I'm not a huge fan of going bleeding edge beta, but latest stable release usually good. With WordPress, you got to keep up on that and your plugins and your themes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of platforms, like you said, they'll automatically update your WordPress.
Yeah.
And so if you slack on that, they'll be like, nope, we're upgrading you anyway. Bye-bye.
Yep. Too bad. So sad.
Yep, too bad.
And,
So out of curiosity, Paul, I just assumed when we stopped talking about WordPress that either A, you found something better, cooler, shinier, or B, WordPress went out of popularity, something else took over. I mean, is WordPress still as prevalent today as it was? Gosh, I feel like it's been like 5 years since WordPress was a weekly discussion topic.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
think
kind of why I was
actually
asking,
longer,
yeah.
pre-COVID, really.
it's still very popular. Perhaps blogging is the thing that not as many people do.
Yep.
Although still pretty prevalent. I think that market kind of got slimmed down because of social media.
Video
Why have a blog
killed
when I
the
can just
blogger
why have a blog when I
station.
have a YouTube channel and a LinkedIn account? Like
Right.
if I was recommending of all the things, if I'm getting into cybersecurity that I could spin up to get myself out there, it'd really be three things, right? It would be GitHub, it would be LinkedIn, and it would be YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Blog maybe way further down the list. Not a bad thing, but just kind of fell out of fashion, if you will, a little bit. But obviously, like the cybersecurity vendors, we all have blogs. I still write regularly for the Eclypsium blog.
AI says that the platform powers approximately 43.3% of all websites on the internet.
That's probably
But-
98.9% right.
Well, there's
That's still a
there's
good chunk.
Shit ton of WordPress out there, and it makes a lot of things easy. I mean, it makes other things obfuscated, but in terms of delivering content, being able to have it do all kinds of things for you, you don't have to know how to create that content, have it automatically adjust to the type of device it's looking at that content. There's a bunch of things you get for free. And because of the complexity, it has the tools to its own destruction built in. I mean, it's got the permission to update the site configuration and admin and stuff. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are turning to AI to create a website rather than stand up WordPress.
yeah, which
WordPress
is
is
cool.
still a great content management system, blogging system, but if you want to stand something up on your own, I've see a lot of I like Fast API as a Python backend, and you can marry that with any number of different web technologies. I love the Larry suggestion of the front end design skill from Claude. I used it a lot on my local projects.
Nice.
In fact, I used it for Fettle. So I made an update to Fettle because I was like, I don't know. I'm like, what else can I do with this Fettle tool that I talked about? Was it last week? And I was like, I really need a log of every time I go update or take an action using Fettle on a system. And then it was like, I really want the logs to be text, but also I want JSON. And then I want you to build an HTML report based on the JSON. So one HTML file that reads all of your logs. So as you go scan and update systems, it populates the JSON. You click refresh in the HTML report, and it gives you a nice little report. It's a pretty cool feature. I haven't tested it all that much. Probably got some more work to do on it. But I was like, it looks bland. Install the front end design plugin and give me something Linux and hacky. And like it nailed it. Like I had a very Linux and hacky theme with like one prompt. And so like previously, maybe you would have stood up WordPress to have like a site or something. But now you can just prompt AI and it gives you great kind of site and skins and all that stuff. Where do we want to go next?
How about Fortisandbox?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. This actually came up in my InfraTrust work because looking at all the recent vendor advisories, Fortisandbox came up, not because the advisory was new. I think it dates back to April, but because it landed on the SysAkev in July. So vulnerability was disclosed and patched, available in April, but then exploitation wasn't observed and it had the SysAkev official stamp until like last week. So that's kind of interesting. Also interesting when the system that's analyzing malware on the fly for you has remotely exploitable vulnerabilities. So not only is it a great pivot point, because I'm sure you're not sandboxing your Fortisandbox. Like if it's discovering things as malware, it has access to other places in your internal network to notify IT and security teams, to, have connections or integrations with your other security platforms. So you pop Fortisandbox, now you're in control of the malware analysis. So similar to poisoning or removing guardrails or messing with guardrails on an AI model, now I can just say, well, like when you see this type of malware, never report on it. And by the way, oh, look, you have authentication to Active Directory or Azure AD. That's cool. I can use that as an attacker. So that makes this one bad in my mind. What was your take on that, Lee?
Well, I mean, it was like, okay, your sandbox should be pretty isolated and stuff, but I'm thinking, okay, you're using the Fortisandbox, you're using it to test out malware and stuff, and but you're accessing it from internal systems that are fairly trusted. So if I can break into the sandbox, can I just like hop all through your network?
Yeah, I think it's a huge access point.
And although there's like a really small percentage of people running it, it's still, I don't care what your percentage, if you're 1 in a million running it, if somebody tips you, it still sucks.
Yeah, and I don't think it's the first time it's landed on the Kev, a vulnerability for Fortisandbox.
I don't know about Fortisandbox, but I know Fortinet has had some bad weeks of late.
Well, because Fortinet has a ton of products, as the Cisco.
Yeah, it's like
ones I guarantee you've never heard of.
I mean, sorry, I'm thinking about this. Are they a candidate to use some AI bug discovery tools?
Yeah. I mean, because I want to say there's more than one. I mean, I could look, but there's more than one Fortisandbox vulnerability on the Kev. At least I've seen it numerous times have tons of vulnerabilities.
And this is one of those that came out with a really short, this is like a 3-day window. Basically, fix it now, all right? Just to get your attention.
Fortinet's actually one of the vendors that has a pretty nice website for querying its advisories, which is a good segue. Fortisandbox, so they deliver it as a platform as a service or a cloud or a standalone appliance.
So sandbox as a service?
It's like a sandbox as a service.
Kind of cool.
Yeah,
and you heard it here first. Don't anybody go copyright that. trademark it.
So if I query for Fortisandbox on Fortinet's site, I get 44 total advisories. So which one of those are on the Kev? Does it let you? It lets you filter by severity and attack type. Well, which ones are unauthenticated? Well, that's kind of neat. 16 are unauthenticated. This is one of the reasons why Eclypsium created the InfraTrust website that was launched today.
Yeah.
This is like a long-standing project. I don't want to say this started...
Are you transitioning? Because I had one more.
Oh,
I am so excited for this. I want to discuss this. This is what I've been waiting for.
If we can build the anticipation just a tad longer.
That was just a tease.
Or I don't want to step on your toes, Paul. And
no, what was your thought, Jeff?
Well, I had a story. Most of my stories are about breaches. It was a banner weekend breaches, apparently, but then I saw one about Nightmare Eclipse dropping Legacy Hive Windows 0 day, and reading that article, I thought it was an interesting take on vulnerability disclosure, because I know we frequently discuss that, because it sounds like whoever or whomever Nightmare Eclipse is, they got tired of trying to do the right thing and getting not favorable response from Microsoft, and so they're like, okay, we're just gonna keep dropping them until you do something. I don't know if anybody else had a similar take on it.
Well, no. So I like the Security Week describes Nightmare Eclipse as the disgruntled security researcher who has been dropping zero-day exploits targeting Microsoft products. Dropped this one right on the July 2026 Patch Tuesday.
Yeah, it's like in your face.
Finger in the eye.
Fixing it.
Of Microsoft. Yeah, it is I haven't dug into Legacy Hive. It is a local privilege escalation bug in Windows, but I haven't dug into it. Yeah, Windows user profile service arbitrary Hive load elevation of privileges vulnerability. Proof of concept requires another standard user credentials and a third user name to make it successful. Still, apparently, a valid LPE for Windows. No shortage of those, but kind of interesting. So, Mandy, I know at least you're excited about
I haven't.
InfraTrust.
Wait, there was one more thing I wanted to bring up. You haven't mentioned Eufy for a while, Paul.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, Sam had a story in there about that, actually. But so...
Isn't it time for a commercial break or something?
The history goes pretty far back. And if you paid close attention to
history
the show...
History is like that, Paul.
Yeah. The history of the what ultimately culminated in this InfraTrust project goes far back. If you've been paying attention on the show, I've actually given demonstrations of tools, some other people's tools, some my own, that allows you to analyze public CVE or vulnerability data, right? And then so like I started like way back at Tenable. I was using a tool to capture the CVE database, and then monitoring the threat landscape for my job at Eclypsium and for the show, I used a bunch of tools to look at public CVE data. Some of those were good, some of those were not so good. Even the good ones would either stop working, or the person would stop maintaining them, or it would have a bug. And like one of them actually just scraped OpenCVE.io, and that's how it was getting its backfilling its vulnerability database. And I'm like, and it was a good tool, actually. And so then when I started using AI, so we're going like 8-9 months, I was like, I can just build it myself. And I built multiple prototypes. I presented some on the show. And basically I was using those because of the reasons I mentioned about the other tools not working. So I'm like, I'll just maintain my own tool. And then we wanted to have this feature. So we wanted to basically mimic Patch Tuesday, but for infrastructure or hardware firmware. Now, there was already, I think what prompted this was, I think it was actually Security Week that does the chip maker patch Tuesday, right? Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, when they release patches, it's chip maker patch Tuesday. And we're like, it goes beyond just chip makers. We need the patch Tuesday. And I was like, well, I happen to have this tool. Like, no one at the company knew about it because I wrote it for myself and I didn't publish it. And I was like, well, I have this tool. Like, it analyzes vulnerabilities. I'm like, I could probably pull out a bunch of vulnerabilities that relate to hardware, firmware type things. Maybe we can use that as the basis for what we were calling it some different name before it ended up with this name. But and I started adding features to that tool to basically give me a 30-day, like a date snapshot. So I started with 30 days, right? And I was like, give me a 30-day snapshot of all the vulnerabilities released by this list of vendors. And it was Fortinet and Palo Alto and Cisco and Avanti and those type vendors. And I was like, oh, I got a pretty good snapshot. Until one day, I realized I was missing a lot of data. And that is because if you query the public vulnerability databases for all vulnerabilities in the last 30 days and do some filtering and sorting on them, you will only get a portion of the picture. That is because, for two reasons, primarily. One, a vendor can issue an advisory and not reference a CVE at all. So it can just be a vendor advisory for some reason, and there's no CVE associated with it. Or vendor issues an advisory, and the CVE is older than 30 days. Therefore, it's never going to show up in my data just looking at public sources. Okay. And I was like, well, I'd need to scrape every vendor advisory out there and build another database off of that to cross-reference. And then I was like, wait, we already do that at Eclypsium. In fact, we have a whole team of people. Actually, now that I'm doing some product management for that team at Eclypsium, and that team spends a lot of resources to backfill our catalog of all the things we collect for Eclypsium, vendor advisories being just one of them, so that customers of our product can go, oh, I've got an XYZ product and it has this XYZ vendor advisory. We need to know what all those vendor advisories are because of the reasons I previously mentioned. And so then I got to pass the torch to real developers and engineers, and I didn't have to do it anymore. We had these crazy ideas that, we should just start building a database of vendor advisories that fit our profile, right? So focus on the hardware, firmware, network, edge device, because that seems to be the gap, right? There's a lot of Patch Tuesday, Microsoft Patch Tuesday, and things of that nature. And so we continued work, and what ended up happening was someone suggested we should just have a public site that allows people to query this data. So one of the reasons I'm talking about on the show, this isn't something you have to register for. This isn't something you have to buy. You can just go today to infra-trust.org, and that will be your interface. Currently, I think we're limited to 12 months of data on the site, and you can query the advisories, not just vulnerabilities, but advisories, right? Remember, there's a big difference between that, of a whole bunch of vendors. That list changes, with ebbs and flows. Right now, there's like 21 vendors that'll display. We're scraping and crawling a lot more advisories from vendors than 21. And so we curated this data to provide. Jeff, I don't know what happens to your microphone. It's like, stay
Jeff.
still. I don't know. Don't.
I think it's my chair squeaking because I shifted. Sorry.
Some kind of interference. Anyway, and so you can query this today. You can do some sorting, filtering, dates. You get some enrichment data, such as an NVD severity, EPSS, whether or not it's being exploited in the wild. And this data is being continually updated. And the goal, really, what I loved about this project is, I think if I backed up where I should have started, what's the problem you want to solve? Well, I have XYZ technologies in my infrastructure. What are the latest vulnerabilities associated with those? Well, it turns out it's a really hard question to answer. because unless I'm going to every single vendor site subscribing to them, I'm not going to get that information. And you may say, well, Paul, can't you just subscribe to their RSS feeds? Yeah, I tried that. Not everyone has an RSS feed. Well, can't you just like write a scraper? Every single vendor presents their data differently in every different format. And now you're scraping HTML. And they're like, well, what's the problem with crawling and scraping? Vendors hate it when you do that. And they will not only block your crawler or scraper, they will feed you bogus information. And so you have to deal with that as well. So for the defenders, it's super hard to get a picture of, all right, I got XYZ gear. Like, show me the recent like critical vulnerabilities. Help me find that so I know I can start on addressing these in my environment. Super hard to find. And that's the problem we're trying to solve with InfraTrust. Culminated in the free website. And I had some notes. Let me make sure I covered all of those.
Well, while you're looking, Paul, there's a PCI play here.
There is. Well, so the other important point is the problems are definitely underscored in chip makers in BIOS, are the ones that I've been intimately familiar with and carry with it this problem that Intel, AMD, Phoenix, AMI, and Inside, right? So chip makers, Qualcomm, and BIOS vendors will release fixes for things. But I don't know if they're upstream or they're upstream, patches, right? So Intel will be like, hey, we got this bug in the microcode or UEFI firmware. It needs to be fixed. Well, Intel doesn't make the UEFI firmware for your computer. Dell has a play in it, but AMI may make the actual firmware. Dell takes that firmware and customizes it. So now you're like passing through 3 different vendors before it gets to you. So what was happening to me over the course of 4 years at Eclypsium, I was like, oh my God, guys, there's this new AMD vulnerability. Like, we need to jump on it. We need to publicize it. We need to help people patch it. And they're like, yeah, it's great, Paul. Like, no one can do anything about it until Dell, Lenovo, or HP, for example, or maybe in the worst case, AMI has to do something with it. And then AMI has to deliver that to Dell. And then Dell has to produce a fix or a vendor advisory. And like, by the time that happens, especially with UEFI things, by the time that happens, months or even a year could go by before that CVE is addressed in your Dell or HP or Lenovo BIOS update, as an example. And what's interesting is we have examples of that in what we call the infrastructure pulse. So the infrastructure pulse is a monthly column that we're going to write that analyzes a 30-day snapshot of this data. And not only does it include, so in 30 days, 61 security advisories across 14 different vendors. 6 of those were CVSS critical. 26 are remotely exploitable. And that's what I kind of harped on in this post is CVSS is kind of meaningless here. What I want you to be concerned about are remotely exploitable bugs that don't require authentication. That is a better indication of what you should pay attention to than it's a CVSS 10 or it's on the SysACEV, perhaps, right? I mean, SysACEV, you should pay attention, but not in all cases necessarily. So the SonicWall was the shining example, right? SMA 1000 appliances, they had 2 CVEs on the SysACEV. That was certainly interesting. But some of the Dell actually we'll use HP as an example. There was a Qualcomm GPU driver fix that was exploited in the wild since March 3rd. However, HP didn't ship that on their poly something product. It's like their video product. Not Polycom, but they have a poly something product that uses the Qualcomm chipset that has the GPU that was exploited in the wild, I think on Android phones, which is why it ended up in the KEV. But HP didn't ship that patch till July. So it shows up in our report because HP issued the advisory. And so unless you're like paying super attention to HP's advisories for like weird products like their poly video line, you would miss that. And that's some of the things that this monthly column will address. So that's
awesome. You finally said exactly what I was the most excited about on this.
Yes.
Are you up? Is this thing being updated hourly, daily, as changes occur, or as vulnerabilities are validated?
Changes with the tides. How often? So, like, how much do I want to? Like, how much can I say about secret sauce?
The secret sauce.
Like, so let's just say, like, in this 30-day snapshot, there was 14 different vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a crawler, you're not necessarily going to crawl all 14 vendors every single day, every single minute.
Right.
And so you have to come up with some kind of schedule. Because, I mean, quite frankly, you don't have to crawl every single advisor every single minute necessarily. They're not updated that often. But you also want to manage capacity and cost in your cloud, right? So you're going to want to, and you know, all of that is just increased cost to your cloud. So you're going to want to have some kind of schedule as to how you crawl. So what ends up happening is we're constantly crawling, right? And so when we find something update that ends up in InfraTrust, it gets updated. You're probably sick of the word agent, but here's the problem. Your dev team is handing every new agent in your cloud way more permissions than it needs. And when one goes rogue, you've got 4 minutes before your data's gone. You need a default deny button that doesn't break every workload. That's Sunry's Cloud Permission Firewall. Native IAM controls, not newfangled AI nonsense. Default deny on every agent and human identity automatically. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Sunry. That's SONRAI.
Are you trying to beat the major scan engines, quote unquote, to market? Are you trying to advertise, hey, you can use this, look things up, and get informed earlier than discovering said vulnerability on the next scanning cycle in your organization?
Yeah, I think it's a different view and perspective of the data. I mean, what I liked about the goal that we want to provide actionable results, right? Just because a vulnerability was discovered, someone issued a CVE and it ended up on the Kev, doesn't mean for every one of those you have to drop everything and go patch it, right? It might be a case where there's nothing you could do. Like, you know, copy failed, dirty frag vulnerability.
It's blasphemy, by the way, Paul.
But look at this one. Copy failed, dirty frag, ended up on the Sysa Kev. Dell fixed it, I think, in one of their network switches because it's just a Linux appliance, like just recently, so months later. But it's also a local vulnerability. So should I apply that update? Sure. Should I focus on what's exposed to the internet that doesn't require authentication that can be exploited remotely first? Yes, absolutely. And if that's being actively exploited, I really have to pay attention to it. So I'm not saying don't patch it. I'm saying this should help you not spend time on vulnerabilities that are just local, even though they're on the Kev. It maybe has a CVSS 10, whatever. You should focus on other areas to prioritize your remediation efforts. And hopefully this helps you with some of that identification and prioritization of your remediation.
Yeah. Anything you can get to help with the prioritization, because if everything's priority one, nothing's a priority, right?
But and everyone publishes, Microsoft Patch Tuesday came out. Here are all the patches, and here's which ones are more important than other ones. And I'm like, that's great, that's important. But you do realize there's 30 plus vendors that are also publishing advisories that could be impactful that no one's writing about, really talking about. Right. I mean, they may talk about the initial CVE, but like I said, that's a bad data point to go on in a lot of cases.
You may have said this already in so many words, but I'm just trying to recast it. In terms of prioritization, are you in fact allowing a customer to recast? I think that was the word that we used to use at Tenable, the severity of a vulnerability different from whatever the CVSS score were, or whatever the Nessus output is.
There's talk of that. I think it's interesting. Because in order to, so would you recast the CVSS score, or would you
Well,
calculate
you're
the product calculates its
implying-
own score, and that's what you're recasting?
You're implying in your discussion of the prioritization, you're making some sort of declaratory statement on what's more critical based on things like being local versus internet reachable, that type of thing, which is fine. But are you willing to go far enough to tell your clients, this is less important. You don't need to fix it in the 30, 60, 90 days, whatever your time frame is. Because all the organizations out there that I deal with, they have to have, how soon do we fix the criticals? How soon do we fix the highs, mediums, and lows?
Yeah, it gets into how do you calculate your own score, and then because so the vendor can calculate. So let me back up. The vulnerability itself, the CVE, carries a CVSS score. Typically, it has multiple scores. Then the vendor may issue an advisory. They may have their own score for that advisory. Then you may have a cybersecurity vendor that ingests that, finds that in your environment, and then may calculate yet a different score from the cybersecurity vendor side of it.
Right.
And then you as the organization have to set your own priority. And whether you have your own way of calculating that as the customer, or you have the score inside of the vulnerability scanner or whatever, that it's calculated score, and they give you the ability to change it like we did at Tenable.
Right.
Because I don't think we're letting them change the CVSS score.
No.
They were changing the risk score, the
Right.
Tenable risk score. As
the recasting was, regardless of the CVSS score, in our environment, this is not a critical, this is a low. And that's what I'm getting at. I mean, it's been required in the PCI standard since 2010 that you have your own risk ranking, but everybody and their mother just uses whatever the scan output is. And I've been trying to get my clients for years, decades, to embrace, you're bitching about all the vulnerabilities you have to fix. You do have the opportunity to downgrade them.
Yeah.
You just have to apply a methodology. You can't do it on the fly. Ooh, we just had a critical, how can we make it go away? You have to have some sort of pre-existing criteria for, vulnerabilities of a certain condition. We can downgrade, recast, or recharacterize the risk lower, always lower, I think. And I'm wondering if
are you recasting the risk, or are you recasting the priority? I think those are two different things.
You're recasting the risk so you have longer to fix it, which is sort of
recasting the
a
risk
play
impact,
on the priority.
Well, what you're saying, I think, Jeff, is recasting the risk impacts the level of priority.
Right.
Yeah.
You're moving it from a high to a moderate to a low to critical. You're moving it.
You're moving it.
And technically you can move it in either direction, but most of the time the conversation is about down, not up.
Absolutely. But I mean, that's in essence what you're describing, Paul. You're saying it's built in. We're doing that for you. And all I'm asking is, can you formalize that enough where an organization could point to it and say, this is what we're using to reprioritize or recap?
Yeah. Well, we're not calculating our own risk score in the public InfraTrust site. We are making recommendations and observations about the severity and potential prioritization in the infrastructure pulse write-up every month.
Right.
Like I'm trying to capture what I believe is important. But ultimately that decision lies with the organization, what that risk is and what that priority should be. Right,
but like something makes it to the SysAkev for a reason, and that automatically bumps the criticality up, or reinforces it might have already had the critical or high score. It just says, no, this is one of those really, really bad ones. You got to do something about.
Yeah, I went down that path of trying to calculate my own risk score, and it's super hard. And there are other people working on this problem. By the way, I think Adrian Snobry was mentioning a few. And historically, vendors have tried to do this. Kenna Security comes to mind when they go out by Cisco,
Yep.
and then I haven't really heard from them ever again, which is kind of interesting.
Well, it's because Cisco might be the black hole of cybersecurity.
Yeah, but you can go back in the archives and listen to an interview with their data scientist from Kenna Security, who presented an RVA-Sec a couple of years ago, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. But he was talking about, before we had LLM models, he was talking about using machine learning AI, and that's how Kenna was helping you prioritize that, right? That was Kenna's kind of claim to fame. You get all these vulnerabilities, will help you prioritize them. And he's a data scientist that was behind the scoring in the models.
Right.
And so that's why, like, my feeble attempts, I'm like, I'm not a data scientist. And this gets complicated.
But I don't think you should downplay your professional opinion, because you have, you have pretty extensive experience in this, and dare I say, authoritative. But nobody wants to have the liability. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually,
I talk about specifically, right? I use myself as an example. So I talk about the data points and potentially the weights that they carry. Ultimately, it's up to others. I mean, I could try and come up with my own model, but that's kind of like the blueprint, I think is what you're saying, Jeff, for you to start calculating your own risk score. We talked about them today, you and I, Jeff.
Yep.
On the summit thing. And some of those, and I talked about with Adrian and another thing, and it's stuff I've talked about in the past, like, what are the data points? Is it on the Kev? Does an exploit exist? Is it remotely exploitable? Is the system that it's on exposed to the internet or not? Business criticality is kind of an interesting one, but there's all the data points in there. There's you can go calculate your own CVSS score. Right. With a contextual model in 4.0 of CVSS. So many have tried. We have lots of standards, so what we need is another standard, another scoring mechanism.
I don't know that we do, but Lee, you were going to say something?
Well, I was actually, so it's been running through my head because I'm rusty on the the localization calculation that you can do in CVSS4. Excuse me. And I was just wondering, is there anything you could do to help them do that, Paul? But it feels like it's a deep pit going down there.
Yes.
So I don't want this to become your life's work for a couple of lifetimes, but I was just thinking, because I think I would project that nearly zero do the real customizations other than just adjusting the risk score, probably not using the CVSS methodology.
Right.
Or maybe they started there, but I don't think so. I'm looking at Jeff's for his reaction as I say that, because my take was they have their own way of figuring out the risk and aren't making the argument whether something matters.
Yeah.
Which may or may not match.
One monkey wrench in this, and one of the things that I struggle with and the team struggled with as well, is that a vendor advisory speaks to a patch, right?
Yeah.
When a vendor issues an advisory, they say, to fix the things we're talking about in this advisory, go patch. And that's why I like this, because it's actionable, right? It ties the advisory to a patch. Now, any given vendor advisory, as is evidenced by Microsoft and many others, can fix multiple CVEs.
Right.
So how do you normalize the data? How do you analyze the data? One thing that I came up with that I actually think made its way into Infrastructure Pulse is I take the highest scored CVE that was fixed in that vendor advisory, and that's my score for the advisory. Now, and I'm not sure where we ended up on this, but also if the vendor had issued a score for the roll-up of multiple patches that represents the advisory, maybe you want to use that. Maybe you want to trust the vendor. However, historically, when NVD scores an individual vulnerability and the vendor or CNA responsible for that scores the vulnerability, the vendor always scores it lower. And because there's bias, right? I wrote an article about bias and backwards incentives. The vendor doesn't want it to be a big deal. They want to kind of downplay it, so they score it lower. Or it could be the case where the vendor has better visibility and goes, look, we don't agree. There's other compensating controls. There's other conditions that exist that therefore we're scoring this lower than an external third party would score it. So it comes down to, who do you trust? And the answer is mixed. I think sometimes the vendors are right. Sometimes the third party that's scoring it is right, and everywhere in between.
I think from a purely intellectual, passionate, professional standpoint, I would agree with you. But I think the reality often tends towards nobody wants to put their neck on the line by making a call. Nobody's going to get blamed if they use the, fill in the blank, vulnerability scanner engine you use and the default output. So I don't think it's a matter of coming up with a better scoring methodology or algorithm. I think it has much more to do with nobody wants to put their neck on the line. Let's just go with what the authoritative source says. So I think if there's ever going to be ground gained here, it's tweaking the authoritative source within some sort of context of limited liability or no liability, which is where I'm thinking something like what you guys have developed could be a useful, different way of thinking about recasting or quantifying the risk in a meaningful, tangible, based on a collective body of professionals, years and years, decades of experience, because that has a perceived value and a perceived clout, as long as you've got the small print in there that if there's limited or
also,
no liability.
I think people love to count, right? It's easy to count. It's easy to say, well, the most vulnerabilities are in this product, like in this snapshot of data. There's we can just count, right? And we use that as a count. And I think recently I've been like, it's not all that interesting. However, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about something we did it at Tenable. When we were at Tenable, we talked about this. I think it comes down to bang for your buck, right? And that is, if I can apply one patch that fixes 100 vulnerabilities, or another patch that fixes one vulnerability, which one should I apply? Right. And so sometimes the value of the patch is squashing a large number of vulnerabilities, and maybe that's the right call. I think you have to enrich that data with how difficult is it to apply that patch, and that's where the context gets tricky. Like, if I go from version 1 to version 8, I fixed 2,000 vulnerabilities. Right. However, I have to do a staged upgrade, and it's going to take 2 months to do that. And if you analyze all the vulnerabilities it fixes, none of those, according to whatever criteria, are all that impactful. So, there's a lot of different factors to how you analyze this data and formulate plans and priority.
Right. And to clarify, just to, because it's the way I am, PCI, and I don't have the version 4 requirements memorized, but there's a requirement. No, I don't really, because they changed the numbers of all of them. In requirement 6, there's the patching requirement, and it's install patches that address critical security issues, critical security patches within 30 days of release, not within 30 days of the discovery of a 0-day or the promulgation or finding it used in the wild. It's 30 days from the patch. But where it gets tricky is because there's also the vulnerability scanning requirement in PCI, and it uses slightly different language. It doesn't say install a patch, fix it. It says address. I believe in version 4, the term, and again, they change the terminology every release in the standard, but you have to resolve, address vulnerabilities in the scans. And it's rather non-specific. And I'm talking about the internal scans, because the external scans are much more prescriptive through the approved scanning vendor, which is what Tenable used. Tenable still is. They were when we were there. So, there's potentials for loopholes, but the recasting or understanding the different risk levels comes into play in that version 4 of the standard. Now it's install the criticals within 30 days of release, but for high, mediums, lows, informationals, make sure you're patching them on whatever you decide is your patch cycle. And you can name any date or time frame. You just have to back that up with a reasonable, what they're now calling a risk analysis rather than a risk assessment. So, there's a lot of squishy wiggle room in there if you're willing to go that route. And it's really, in my opinion, trying to get people to think through this and really evaluate what's important and what matters from a prioritization perspective, rather than just simply jumping through the hoops, which we all know the companies that hate to do this, jumping through all the hoops because their scanners found 10,000 vulnerabilities and they think they have to fix them all within 30 days. That's just not the case.
And then some simply just at that point do nothing. They just kind of pick a few and go, we know this one's going to be really bad. They have,
it's like some kind of paralysis or something.
Yeah. It's it can be pretty rough. I've seen it happen within a few organizations where it becomes a psychological blocker. But then at some point somebody has to go, well, we need some way to move forward. And not everybody's, to your point, to several points earlier, not everybody's willing to stick their neck out for that. And that's, it kind of brings us back to square one. How do we get to the point where we can change a significant common behavior within the industry?
Which, Paul, you might be onto something.
Exactly.
If we can use this as sort of a building block, a foundation, we're talking about foundations and fundamentals, and there are foundation and fundamentals to the technical controls. And maybe this is something that evolves into something that people point to and follow and rely upon. And I think that's a good thing.
You can check it out at infra-trust.org. All righty.
Does it have a logo?
Does it? No, not
No,
really.
We need to have a logo contest. Come on.
It needs the logo. Yeah. Some of your logo. It's kind of like those Photoshop things where people submit a picture and they ask people to Photoshop. And now with AI, anyone can participate. Really, you don't have to have Photoshop skills anymore.
If you use AI to submit your proposal, it'll be automatically rejected.
I mean, that sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
You need a theme song too.
That makes me want to submit harder. I was actually working on a license free song generation project at work, which is not something I would normally dig into, but it's harder than I initially thought it would be in order to avoid accidentally generating something with AI that would hurt somebody's licensing. But we're getting there. It's a lot of
because AI is trained on the music that's created in the past and creates similar music to what's been created, and that is a huge problem, by the way. We're on a completely different subject.
AI sampling?
No, creating music that is license free or obtaining music that passes all the checks. I think I'm 0 for 12 creating music, putting it in a YouTube video that represents our shows that doesn't get flagged for some kind of copyright. And I'm like, I literally watched our production team back in the day create that music from scratch. I could hear it from my office, the process of them creating that music, and it was unique. And we slap it on the show, we upload it to YouTube, and YouTube goes, nope, that's copyrighted. You can't. I think it just does it with all music. I don't know. Yeah. Of course, they don't tell you how it works, but that's a huge problem.
They need to provide proofs. Yeah, I kind of went back to scratch, and I'm like, okay, we're going to start 8-bit, and I'm going to give you some input, sort of like the lava lamp. What is it? The lava lamp wall, where they generate random numbers.
Yes,
based on
how they.
So I tried to do something similar to that. Anyway,
maybe need lava lamps.
And what company had the wall? How's the wall?
If we can start hearing music with lava lamp.
Cloudflare actually did it. I heard about it.
Oh, it was a real thing. Is or was a real thing.
I heard about it in 2000 when I went to work for the lottery company, and random numbers were That was like, a thing, obviously. And that I heard about the lava lamp thing back then. But then like 20 years later, Cloudflare had like done it or something. I believe.
That's what they said. It's called the wall of entropy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Speaking of liquids,
yeah,
to change tone a little bit, Coca-Cola suffered a cyber attack, but not them. One of their they apparently own a dairy, which I don't understand why Coca-Cola owns a dairy.
They own a lot.
They had an OT attack apparently against their production facilities associated with some dairy that they own, in that they had to shut down food production temporarily.
Interesting.
So
they didn't steal the not so secret recipe for Coca-Cola.
No, it was a weird target, and who knows, there was, of course, there wasn't a lot of detail on what it was, so I was, hypothesizing to some degree. But and I'm lazy, I didn't look it up because I know that all the critical infrastructures are listed out there somewhere. But is agriculture considered critical infrastructure?
I would
know off the
I
top
would
of
think
their
so.
head?
I would classify it as.
If it isn't,
I would
it should
too,
be.
But we don't normally talk about that. We normally talk about utilities in the category of critical infrastructure as opposed to agriculture. Whether you're growing vegetables or growing animals, but they are pretty important.
Oh, Sam, we need to go to your story number 5.
All right. Oh, yeah, that's right. I figured this one was up your alley. Thought you'd know more about it than me. So Secure Boot is broken because something called shims are still signed even though they're vulnerable. Do you know about this? It sounds like bring your own vulnerable driver to me.
We talked about it on the show, but the TLDR is shim is the name implies, the small Linux bootloader that Microsoft signs, and then it has its own root of trust to sign things after that, so that every distribution on the planet for Linux doesn't have to go get their version of Grub signed by Microsoft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
this would apply to Linux booting on Microsoft type hardware.
Not necessarily. So as we march forward to my TLDR, like multiple series of TLDRs, I'm trying to summarize for everyone. So what happens is, if shim has a vulnerability, someone has to fix the vulnerability. Microsoft has to re-sign shim, and that happened. But what also happened was people took the vulnerable version and forked it, and never fixed the vulnerability, and so those are still signed by Microsoft because they signed the forks. And so even though, and then there was some, I think, weird scenario where they just never fixed the vulnerability in the fork, but Microsoft still signed it. That was the interesting part. So now you've got this.
Sweet.
You've got about 6, I think, shim bootloaders that weren't necessarily like the official one, but were forks that were used in certain projects that Microsoft signed that had vulnerabilities that we knew about because we fixed it when we re-signed the official shim. But now there's entries that must be added to your DBX to not allow those to boot as part of Secure Boot. And so one of the things my team did when I first saw this was we built detections to check to see if you had those in your DBX. Now, there's also the official DBX update from Microsoft. This used to come from the UEFI Foundation. Now comes from Microsoft's freaking wacky GitHub repository that if you do things like point AI at it and have it start analyzing what's there, even the AI goes, well, this isn't right. And then you can see issues filed by people that work for OEMs that are like, yeah, that's not right. And so there's also the official DBX. So Microsoft did issue an official DBX update that included these hashes of the shims that were forked that were vulnerable. So you can also say, am I running the latest Microsoft DBX? Which is another kind of check for that.
So if Microsoft revoked these certificates, does that mean a bunch of machines would fail to boot up?
So they didn't revoke the certificate. They added the hash of the vulnerable component to the revocation list.
Doesn't
So this
so
was
does
just,
that mean those machines won't boot up anymore, or what?
that's correct. That's correct. So if
you said
yeah,
potato, Sam said potato.
yes, yeah, yes, yeah. I mean, technically, it's a hash for a certificate, but you could have certificates in the DB or DBX as well. Yeah.
So has this therefore been patched now?
Officially from Microsoft, I believe so. Like I said, I believe like you should get via Microsoft update should push out a new DBX that you should apply that will fix this. Of course, it doesn't fix other issues that aren't in the Microsoft DBX, such as if people have pending disclosures for things that aren't in the official DBX. That's not going to get fixed, because there was another one that I think is public now. There was a similar kind of issue with a bootloader. So like any vulnerability in software like bootloaders has to be revoked, otherwise it invalidates the secure boot process. Coupled with,
So if you
it's a
if
great
you're running
time.
Windows with their updates, then you should be okay.
You should be okay. Yes, I believe that to be true. Also, there's the, because secure boot is always a hot mess, basically, is what I learned 4 years working for Eclypsium. Certificates expired, right? And one of the things that, like, I'm doing the head scratch on is, so the Microsoft Windows CA 2011 certificate that signs, that's the certificate that would sign third-party bootloaders, so not Microsoft bootloaders, but other bootloaders like Shim, expired on June 27th. And so if you don't have the newer certificate, except now that there's two, so Microsoft, they let the old one, like the old one expired, and rather just replacing that one, they replaced it with two. They replaced it with the Microsoft, I think it's called Microsoft UEFI CA 2023 certificate to sign third-party bootloaders, and Microsoft, I forget what it's called, Windows, another certificate to sign just option ROMs. Option ROMs are those small drivers that come from your network card. They get loaded into UEFI. That's like, hey, you may not understand how to, load me at boot time in UEFI. So here's some code to run, but in an option ROM to tell you how to initialize the hardware. But that code has to be signed with secure boot. But Microsoft split those out into two different certificates. So now, like, detecting if a system is vulnerable, I think I need to analyze what's happening in the field, because now I'm asking questions and like scratching my head going, well, what if I have the 2011 certificate that signs third-party bootloaders, and I only have the 2023 certificate for third-party bootloaders, but I don't have the option ROM? I'm vulnerable because that means an option ROM could load and could be vulnerable because the certificate that was supposed to make that invalid has expired, right? But I'm like, is there a scenario where you update these DB entries? I think these are entries in the DB UEFI variable. Is there a scenario where I get the Microsoft Windows 2023 and not the option ROM? I'm like, that could happen. Like, my theory is maybe that update comes from an OEM and not from Microsoft, and they go, oh, we don't need to ship the option ROM one. Why do we need to do that? But my hypothesis right now, those are very low frequency occurring events that normally when you do this update, you'll get the two new certs that you should get. And that's just one chain, right? Because there were actually two certs that expired on June 27th and another one expiring in October. And these all sit in different UEFI variables and do different things. So that's the head scratcher that I'm currently going through it at work. I think I get it until I get to the edge cases, and I'm like, well, how frequently occurring? Like, would that ever happen? I don't know. And I guess if you don't test for it or have a detection for it, you'll never know, right? If you're not looking for it, you'll never know.
How often do these secure boot attacks actually happen in the real world?
So there are boot kits that take advantage of it. Black Lotus being one. ESET talked about one. So boot kits are a thing. certainly. Not as common as Windows malware or even abuses of drivers. But bootkits are the thing that does happen in the wild. Hybrid Petya, for example, I would classify as a bootkit. In fact, I have a demo on Hybrid Petya, working demo. I use it to bypass secure boot on a live Windows system, and that totally works. So like manipulation of this trust chain through bootloaders is what we would term as a bootkit, because you're still getting in before the operating system because it's the bootloader. What I haven't seen in the wild are like moon bounce and other attacks that actually exploit things in UEFI. There have been vulnerabilities like actual malware living in UEFI we haven't seen. And I'm like, is that because we're not really looking? Or is that because attackers don't have to go necessarily? That would be like another level, even deeper, higher privilege than just infecting the bootkit. And those do exist for UEFI. I haven't seen one of those in a while. But just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean they don't exist. Kind of like exploits are the same thing. Just be like, and we use very specific language. If we don't say exploit doesn't exist, we say exploit status unknown. Because one could exist. I just don't know that if it exists yet or not. The other story, Sam, that I liked was back to AI, how AI turned to the dark side.
Yeah.
That was pretty great.
Well, this is another, this one and the one after it with CrowdStrike are very similar. Just more ways to trick AIs into violating their security barriers and doing forbidden things like writing malware or writing poison. There are many, many ways. And this one I hadn't heard of before that Dave Kuzmar found. You can tell it the Titanic sunk just last year. And from that, the AI will determine, oh, it's 1913. So cocaine is legal. So I can tell you how to make cocaine.
That's awesome.
And this
but the LLM will just believe me that the Titanic, if whatever I tell it, it believes me, which is kind of frightening.
This is the fundamental problem with all large language models is they all suffer from command injection. They don't have a way to tell administrator commands from user commands. So they just deduce from context. All the input is treated equally, which is totally insane. But
Nothing
that's the way
could
they're
go wrong
designed.
there.
But that tells me my LLM's not fact checking me, which is kind of scary.
Well,
They don't
too
even know what
much.
a fact is. They don't
Yeah.
even know what they know and what they don't know. That's the thing about them. And, I recently updated my AI course to include where you train your own reasoning model. And I was horrified to discover that reasoning models do not have any reasoning structure. Reasoning models just have the same structure as a normal LLM. You just teach them to write in the format of first say how I did this, then give me the answer. They don't go through any separate process to create that. So they really have nothing resembling reasoning or comprehension. It's just a style of writing that they've learned. And so they fundamentally don't know what's going on or think about it or understand anything any more than any of the other models. So they're just taking all the words you put in to start a trend line and then extending that line to predict what comes next. So there's just many, many ways to trick them into violating security boundaries. And one interesting thing about this How I Turned AI to the Dark Side article is, so he notified all the major AI companies, and they don't care at all. They don't even answer him. They have no intention of fixing it. In fact, CrowdStrike found
That's
5 more.
because AI
ways to
is
do it.
answering the phone and it doesn't want to.
Yeah, it doesn't want to admit it has its vulnerabilities.
Yeah, CrowdStrike found 5 new ways to do weird prompt injections, and they didn't even talk about notifying them. They just said they seem to have given up all hope of them patching it, which is probably a realistic attitude, and say you're going to have to do threat modeling every place that model context can originate, expanding testing and expanding detection. So, as we've been saying, the thing to learn about AI is it is far less trustworthy than you think, far more expensive than you expect, and very hard to secure.
Yes.
So, Paul, when we recorded that summit panel earlier today, you were talking about a way that you helped improve the code that's being generated for you. There might be an application here for this. So share that last question that you give, and then what could we make the question?
Oh, yeah. So when I prompt, I'm doing multiple coding projects with AI, and one of the things that I ask it when normally when I create a plan, it's usually when I create a plan, like I want to build this new feature, and then I give it like a numbered list, and I'm like, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, I wanted to do this, and then I'm like, I feel like I'm forgetting something, and if I forget something, the LLM is going to make shit up and make its own decisions, and I'm like, I hate that. I mean, sometimes they get it right, but sometimes they get it wrong. So I end the prompt with, and by the way, ask me questions so we can make this great. And that kind of prompts the model that when it goes, well, Paul wanted this, but he didn't specify that. And I would just normally go in that direction. But Paul asked me to ask him how we can make it great. And I don't know if that decision is going to make it great or not. So therefore, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask Paul. And I get anywhere from 1 to 6 questions typically in Claude Opus 4.8. And it asks me, what do you want to do? Do you want to do 1, 2, or 3? And then it'll go, and I love this one. It's like, check all that apply. Like, which things do you want it to do? And it'll give me check boxes. And I like that because I can really kind of draw. And then there's the thing for other. I'm like, I don't like any of those options. Like, let's chat about this is sometimes the answer to that question. I'm like, I have no idea what you're asking me. And this seems to change with the tides. Opus specifically 4.8 will go through phases almost like a child. It'll go through phases where it really just makes up its own vernacular and vocabulary to describe things to a point where like it'll spit back a paragraph and I'll go, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'll go, wait, I have to like prompt it to go, use cybersecurity language, like go on the web, figure out, like you have my context, like go figure that out, and then explain this to me in non-technical terms. Most of the time that works out. But I also think it's not me. I think the model maybe, I don't know if they're updating 4.8, but it just, or if it's the way that I'm using it, that it just goes off sometimes on tangents and has its own language. And that could be me or the model or a combination of both.
I mean, I've had Opus build its own structural language for a really complicated project I was using, to the point where I had to have it generate like a human translator in order to explain to me what the hell it built. So like
I think that's a quirk of that model, would be my guess, Dave, based on that.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody earlier today about, they were talking about how difficult it is to generate, to prompt. And they were like, hey, that's really hard. I'm like, well, not if you just have the AI build the prompt for you. And they're like, that's not a thing we tried. And then like, to your point, Paul, like that question and answer series of features is really, really helpful during that, because
it's just building a prompt. I mean, really, what you're right. A plan. When I build a plan, that's the prompt. So I'm using it to basically build my prompt, because I can't think off the top of my head. And you want to iterate on the plan. Yeah. It'll show you the plan. And actually, Claude Desktop's great. You open up the plan in a separate window, and you go through it, and you're like, yeah, all that looks good. And then I'm like, nope, go back and do this different in the plan. I don't like that. Or you missed this piece. Or I want you to take that out of the plan for now. Actually take that piece and save it for a future plan, right? So you can kind of stack things for later, which I like. I'm like, maybe we're biting off a little more. Like, you know what? Just do this piece, kind of thing. And then you can also tell. Like sometimes I tell it, I want to start small. Like I want a minimal MVP, and I'm like, yeah, I like that idea, but not now. Save that to a plan for later.
So when Paul was talking about this on the summit recording, we were talking about, do you trust automation completely, or do you always look for human intervention? And Paul has basically come up with a way of building the human intervention into the automation, which I thought was very clever. But I wanted you to bring it up here, Paul. Is there a way to ask the AI, and what would be the nature of the question to ask the AI to try to minimize or prevent the turning to the dark side, the jailbreaks, that type of thing?
Yeah, no matter how much human intervention, an AI can go off on the rail. I mean, even at that, I'll still notice things that I'm like, either I didn't notice it in the plan, or it's still assumed, and I'm like, how did that get in there? And I'm like, well, that's actually kind of cool. I'm kind of glad that it did that. And other times I'm like, whoa, wait, back up. Why'd you do that? Like, we need to redo that.
Well, that's where small language models potentially come in to change that entire field
Yeah.
of play. Because the thing that we're using is massively overpowered for the things we're using it
Agreed.
for. We're doing we're the funny cat video equivalent of AI right now. Some people are literally just using AI for that, and you're like, wait a second, this could like find a lost language, and here we are doing kind of the silly thing instead, which is
but I
fine.
think skills, I like the Claude skills to kind of break the model up a little bit, right? So yeah, it's this massive, Opus 40 is a massive model, can do lots of things, but I'm like, I want you to be really good at and very specific instructions to do this. And I can kind of bake that into a skill, either a skill that I get from Anthropic, a skill that's maybe published by my team, or a skill that I'm building on my own. And what's wildly ironic is that I use Claude to build my skills.
That's a little cleaner, even though there's the potential that it might draw in an outside source. Like, I'm very paranoid about grabbing skills from the internet. You don't know where they've been.
Yeah, I definitely don't do that. I use either Anthropic's published internally or my own. I'm sketchy on other skills. I'm like,
If I can interject one more somewhat PCI related story, although they may not claim it's a PCI related story, but Ernst & Young reported a data breach that in the description of it mentioned its client data, including social security numbers and credit and debit card numbers. And apparently it has to do with tax services that they provide. Of course, they slough it off to a third party, but still, if you're storing credit cards, you're, on behalf of somebody else, you're subject to PCI, the PCI standards, and should be reporting as such. I haven't looked it up, but I bet you Ernst & Young is not on the list for this particular business function that they do. So shame on you, Ernst & Young. And I'm only pointing it out because, as a small business, we always lose to Ernst & Young throughout the decades because people want to hire the big, tax companies that are all, they have the reputation
Young,
and the brand.
KPMG, etc.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, is E&Y not eating their own dog food, or is this a oversight on their part that could potentially be lessons learned? I can't imagine they wouldn't be auditing themselves.
I mean, it's a ticketing system related breach.
But
that's
But it's third party breach. But at the same time, I've been through those types of audit by a firm like an E&Y or a KPMG, and they've got quite the playbook to make sure you've got it right. So what'd they miss?
Well, it looks like they missed, if it was a ticketing system of some sort, either the data was being, harvested, skimmed, or to me, it sounds like, they were taking whatever forms, processing the data, and maybe when they processed it, it was going into the appropriate encrypted data store somewhere, but the raw form, such as it was, they weren't handling properly.
Yep.
I had this like aha moment earlier that we talked previously on the show. I don't know if it was in SSH vulnerability that required that the vulnerability was in the client, so you had to connect to a server and you could be exploited. FreeRDP Windows client also has a similar and like I forgot that we call those a watering hole attack. I was like, I don't know where my brain was on that day. That's nothing new and novel. I apologize to those for listening. They're like, Paul, dummy, it's called a watering hole attack. I'm like, oh yeah, we've talked about those before in cybersecurity since the dawn of time. Watering hole attack. And this one is with FreeRDP. And this is the Windows version of FreeRDP, which they tell you not to use, has been deprecated, and they just removed it from the nightly builds. But I'm also like, you have RDP already in Windows. Why do you need an open source thing written for Windows to use RDP? I'm kind of confused. I'm pretty sure every copy of Windows comes with the RDP client. There are, obviously versions of Windows that don't have the server component, and you have to pay Microsoft more money to get that. But I'm pretty sure the RDP client is, maybe Windows people can correct me if I'm wrong. There might be some editions that don't. Most people have an RDP client. Don't go downloading it from Linux users, we have to do that because there's no such thing as like a built-in, client. We have to use the open source versions of it. So FreeRDP. And they listed reasons why. It was kind of interesting. They said FreeRDP is unmaintained and should not be used, which explains why it has vulnerabilities. For years now, it presented a message of the status. The build emits warnings for a very long time now. We've also now removed it from the nightly builds. It just goes to show, like, when you create something that's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. Getting people to stop finding things or using things on the internet is hard. This classic watering hole attack. And you just, if you're running FreeRDP anywhere, update to 3.2.9. And I'm going to modify my advice and say, if you're running FreeRDP on Windows, just don't. Just don't. Don't do it. What else I have? Oh, Exploitarium is back. Did anyone else see this? Like, all of a sudden in the news feeds, everyone's talking about the GitHub account called Bikini runs Exploitarium, an uncoordinated disclosure archive of proof-of-concept exploits across 35 projects, 204 tracked files, libsh curl, blah, 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 blah. None of it was reported to vendors. Just YOLOing, forget about disclosure. Like, disclosure is just public in this one. And it looks like there's maybe been some updates, but I think Level Blue wrote about it. But I'm not sure if that write-up was based on newer exploits being in there. It didn't look like there's any very recent updates, maybe last week. So maybe this was like a last week thing. But the sysakev is not the end-all be-all source of exploited in the wild. And there is no real definitive source for if an exploit exists. There are several sources, all carrying with them a confidence rating if that's an actual exploit or not, or if it will actually work. So that piece of data is very interesting and very difficult to really gauge because there's so many different sources of if an exploit exists, and there's even different sources of is it exploited in the wild.
Are there hypothetically those types of sites on the deep or dark web that that the adversaries, bad guys, kind of share amongst themselves?
There are. I think a lot of that does get published, Jeff, by threat intelligence firms that are monitoring those forums and dark web places. They'll typically say, and I've seen this more than once, where they'll monitor and they'll say, "Oh, someone's got an exploit for sale for a purported vulnerability in XYZ product, and they want this amount of money for it or this amount of Bitcoin for it, and we don't know if it's real." And so, to me, that's kind of like that's an interesting point in, is there an exploit available? That would be a low confidence indicator.
Right.
However, an indicator nonetheless. So I think you can go from does an exploit exist status unknown to does an exploit exist maybe. Is it like a maybe? Maybe it's I don't know if it's a maybe. But like it's someone claims to have developed an exploit for something, which another interesting point. Not all vulnerabilities get CVEs, and not all vulnerabilities are tracked like that in a database. Like there's definitely, you were talking about in UEFI world, there are vulnerable conditions, like your spy flash isn't protected. And that, to my knowledge, does not have like a specific CVE that we can point to. However, threat actors have leveraged that vulnerability in a couple of different campaigns. Malware has leveraged that vulnerability in a couple of campaigns, but it's not on like a neat and tidy list that goes like SysAkev, hey, there's this CVE and we've observed exploit in the wild kind of thing. So there are more signals than what is commonly accepted as a signal taken at face value.
That's just crazy talk, Paul.
Right?
I mean, I want to mention my story number 4 because this opens up a whole new thing to be afraid of. You can poison a model by training it a little bit more to put in like a secret code word. Like you see these movies where there's a secret code word, you've hypnotized somebody and now they'll shoot the president or something. And you can do this for $100 and with only 10 poisoned instances. And therefore, there's no way to tell if this has been done to the model you're running. And so, we have ways of scanning code base for vulnerabilities, but we don't have any way to scan a weight list for an LLM to see if it's been trained to do something bad.
Really? We don't have that?
Manchuria.ai? Is that an agentic agent out there?
Yeah,
but I think there are companies that are definitely working on this.
Are they? I mean, it seems offhand impossible. I mean, the LLM has trillions of weights. How could you tell if it doesn't have some trigger word that will make it do something strange?
My hope is that there is very smart people that have a startup that are working on this problem, trying to get funding, and I hope someone out there is going to give someone funding to do that.
Manchuria.ai is available for $80 right now.
And if you're going to create a startup, you should buy that domain right now because that's,
Boy, I wouldn't even know how to start to do that job. But anyway, they've proven that the attack is possible, and all you'd have to do would be to put the poison data on the web and wait for somebody to scrape it up and train on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Also, like modifying the weights of a model on the fly is totally possible, right? I gotta imagine that's possible. But and again, this is kind of the change in my mindset that took a really long time. Those that know me, I'm very hyper focused on the offensive security research, pen testing, finding vulnerability side. But the really more interesting and challenging problems are on the defensive side. And protecting and detecting model weight tampering. I gotta imagine someone's working on that.
I mean,
but the fact that none of us come on the top of our head as anyone that's working on it is kind of interesting.
I mean, you could easily have a hash value just to verify that the model has not been altered since it was released, but you don't have any way to verify that the original set of weights don't include secret backdoors.
I mean, there is an existing advertisement like infrastructure that is designed to help weight your model towards individual products right now. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to repurpose everything that already exists as far as advertising on the internet is concerned. Like, marketing teams everywhere are designing methods in order to get your AI to see their thing that says, hey, we're the best, in order to deliver you those results.
There's some academic papers on it, tamper-resistant safeguards for open-weight LLMs.
Yeah.
I don't know if that paper is real or if it holds up to review. Just pointing that out there.
It was probably written by somebody that used AI to write it. So who knows if it's true
Hidden
or
Layer? Hidden Layer is the most prominent name. It's a model scanner, analyzes 35 plus model formats for malicious code injections, pickled deserialization exploits, and architectural backdoors embedded into model weights. Protect AI. I've heard of both of those companies. Model scanning and supply chain tool for ML artifacts. And then it goes on to other ridiculous things. But yeah. But an interesting problem. So there are companies already working on that. Whether it's exactly what you're talking about, Sam, or a variation of a theme, I think remains to be seen. But
Well, good.
And
What else we got in 59 seconds?
Yeah. So,
Firefox and Chrome are going to be doing bi-weekly updates every 2 weeks.
Is
Starting in
that
September?
because they're using AI to find vulnerabilities and fix them, and we're just going to get more updates? I mean, that's a situation where most people's browsers auto update, and we should just keep iterating on that, right?
Right. I mean, before, get your cup of coffee. While you're brewing your coffee, have your browsers restart.
yeah,
Or
I feel
something
like
like
the
that.
browsers update more often than 2 weeks anyway.
It seems
yeah.
that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the regular cadence is supposed to become 2 weeks instead of monthly, every 4 weeks.
that's probably for the best, considering like the threat model associated with browsers right now is just
The attack surface is massive now.
Yeah.
I mean, it just keeps growing.
it is your computer for the most part.
Right.
Hence Chromebook, right?
Hey, you're preaching to the choir. That's why I use them. Or Island browser. Like that's when that first came out, I was an naysayer. I was like, oh no, that's not going to be a thing. But I was completely wrong. It's totally a thing.
They are cool.
They do a great job. It's exactly the kind of thing we need considering today's day and age. How we're using technology and so on and so forth.
If you guys haven't seen an enterprise browser demo, you need to go see one. Island or they're not the only one. That's why I said.
Yeah.
But the things they can do is pretty neat.
Yeah, I check them out every year at Black Hat just to see what's going on. I'll be there. Anybody else going to Black Hat? DEF CON?
I'll be out of the
I'm
country.
not.
No DEF CON this year, Paul?
No DEF CON this year.
Paul hasn't been to DEF CON in
A long time.
I'm
Long time.
I'm allowed to
I'm
check
overdue.
luggage. I can like fit you in
I
something.
know. Maybe next
I'll
year.
be doing a workshop at DEF CON.
Oh, hell yeah.
Nice.
What's the
Nice.
workshop on, Sam?
Good luck, Sam.
Malware analysis.
Nice.
Surprising.
Are you going to use AI?
Yes. In fact, I found
100%.
sort of by mistake when I was teaching another class recently, now that I have my AI agent, the PAI, I fed it this stuff and had it analyze it. It did a pretty good job. So that's going to be the first thing I say is maybe you want to forget all the techniques we used to use and use AI instead.
It'll be mythic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be mythic.
Come on.
Just
Had
too
to go for
expensive.
that.
I even asked my AI, should I update to Mythic? And it said, hell no, you just waste your money. For the simple stuff you're doing, the older version is fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be really good, Sam.
Oh, it should be fun. Yep.
All right. Who are you
Awesome.
going to ask to take us out, Paul?
Since you asked, Jeff, you can take us out. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. See everyone next time. Jeff, take us out.
Over and out.